Welcome back to the Richard Sherman podcast. Another day, another dollar. Mitchell, some young men just made some dreams come true last night. But one guy who we're a fan of did not have his dream come true, at least as of yet. Shedeur Sanders, son of primetime Deion Sanders. We thought he would go to the Giants at 3, potentially the Raiders at 6, maybe the Saints at 9. If that all failed, I thought it was almost a guarantee that he'd go to Tomlin at 20. He went none of those spots. Not only did he not go, Mitchell, the Giants come back, trade back into the draft to the 25th pick and take a quarterback that wears number 2, but it was not Shedeur Sanders, and that is unfortunate. They took Jackson Dart, who it seems like just randomly, his stock started to fly and increase late in the season. I mean, his stats looked really good. He did play in the SEC, but obviously Shedeur had incredible stats. One, best quarterback in college, 74% completion percentage, over 40 touchdowns passing the football, led his team to, a much better record, improved record than they had ever had. I thought he played incredible football. I thought he showed enough to be drafted in the first round of the National Football League, and obviously the teams thought otherwise. There's a high probability that he'll be selected in the second round in the first 5 picks, I would imagine. But what do you think about that, and why do you think it happened?
Well, Richard, first off, this should be a national holiday. The NFL draft, by far my favorite time of the year. Shedeur Sanders, like you said, he got it done at Jackson State. He moves on to Colorado, elevates that program to relevance nationally, and now he's getting his jersey retired. He was a human highlight reel out there. Obviously, he had a huge weapon in Travis Hunter, who went number 2 overall, rightfully so. But it yields the question of, hey, is it because of his last name? Do you think these teams are looking at him as a potential distraction because he is the son of Deion Sanders, Coach Prime? I just don't get it, because we saw reports from the anonymous executives saying that, he interviewed terribly. He was, what was the word? Pretentious, entitled. You don't see it with that level of talent, because there are so many teams that are QB needy, and to pass on a talent like Shedeur Sanders, it does not make sense to me. So that begs the question. Do you think because he is Coach Prime, Deion Sanders' son, do you think that had anything to do with this?
Yeah, I think it. Well, first off, let's get to the first thing you addressed, the anonymous sources. And you know how I feel about anonymous sources and people who don't have to put their name behind things, people who don't have to put their word behind things, their face behind things. Not only that, people can make up stories. People can make up things and nobody has said them and say, hey, anonymous source said Shedeur Sanders did this, or Jackson Dart did this, or Cam Ward did this, and there is no investigation into this source so that you can say, hey, that's a credible source or a not credible source, because it may not be a source at all. And that's a very frustrating thing for me to deal with, and to see such negative press put out there as Shedeur Sanders comes out with no fact checking behind it. So we don't know if it's from a credible source. We don't know who it's from at all. You could sit there and say a high level exec. What high level exec for what team? Because just because they're in a general manager position doesn't mean they're a high level exec, because there are bad general managers in the National Football League. There are bad coaches. There are bad scouts. So you can't take everybody who says something about somebody at face value. And I think that's the thing, even with an anonymous source, we should be able to vet, but you can never vet. You can never vet if it's even actual real source. And that's very frustrating. But Shedeur played well enough to be drafted in the first round. And I think, with the negative press and maybe how he carried himself or whatever the case may be, he just didn't happen. But for the Pittsburgh Steelers to draft a D tackle with their defensive line as stacked as it is, obviously Cam Hayward's getting older and, but coming off a Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl season, TJ Watt's getting older, but you go after a position where you're like, hey, we have guys in place, but in the future, we're going to need new guys. Cool. I understand that. But you also have Mason Rudolph right now penciled in as your starter. And no disrespect to Mason Rudolph, but you don't think Mason Rudolph is the future. You draft for the future. You draft a better player that you can help build and motivate. Maybe you get Aaron Rodgers, but even if you get Aaron Rodgers for a season or two, you still need a young guy to follow up. So for them not to take a quarterback and pass on Shedeur Sanders at 20 was really head scratching for me, because you don't have an answer in the house right now. You don't even have an answer in the agency. You don't have, I don't see how you go through a season with what you have right now. If you go out there with Mason Rudolph, you're wasting another year of TJ Watt and his talented core. What did you trade for DK Metcalf for? If you're going to go out there and not make this team better at the quarterback, the most important position on your football team, you're going to pass on improving it. And I don't think there's any question that Shedeur Sanders has the pedigree, has the performance, has the intangibles, has the things that you want for a quarterback in the National Football League. Maybe you didn't think he was right for your program, but I really would love to hear the answer from some of these GMs of why he didn't go or why they didn't pick him. At least these quarterback needy teams like the Giants go pick Jackson Dart. Why do you pick Jackson Dart over Shedeur Sanders? Please show me the tape or show me what it was about Jackson Dart that made him a better selection than Shedeur Sanders, if that's where you're going with the quarterback spot. I think every draft expert had Shedeur over Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart kind of moved up the boards late in the draft process, but it's always weird to me to see guys move up the draft charts that while football's not being played. And there's no football being played right now. So, outside of, hey, if you had some character concerns or some red flag concerns and maybe he put those to bed, then a guy can move up some. But if you're saying, hey, this guy, we've watched all the tape he's over his years in college. We've seen him in practice. We've reviewed everything, and we think he's here. And to go through the process and say, oh, he's moving up the process because we met the guy and talked to him and found out he's really smart, or maybe a guy isn't really smart, or whatever the case may be. I'd love to hear why, the reasoning, because I don't understand this.
It doesn't make sense. The only thing I can think of in terms of the Steelers is they just spent a first-round pick a couple years ago on Kenny Pickett, and we saw how that worked out. Maybe they weren't dead set on Kenny Pickett. Maybe they felt like they settled a bit. Maybe they felt like they were going to settle with whoever the best quarterback was available, and they chose to go the alternative route. Like you said, it seems to me like the Steelers are banking on Aaron Rodgers playing for them, and if not, it's going to be a long and frustrating season. We've seen George Pickens throw hissy fits on the sideline. I can't imagine how many fits he's going to be throwing with Mason Rudolph throwing him the ball for 17 games. But that makes you scratch your head even more with the Steelers. Shedeur Sanders, the one knock on him that you see from scouts is that, his timing. He's not a good timing thrower. Maybe he doesn't go through his progressions properly, but let's not discount the fact that he was playing behind Colorado Buffalo's offensive line for the last 2 years. And I know they kind of piecemealed together through the transfer portal, and they didn't have the best athletes up front to protect him. But what he showed in those moments was an ability to make plays on the fly. This guy's a playmaker. He's got everything you need in terms of being able to get out of the pocket and be mobile. Everyone's talking about having mobile quarterbacks, and Shedeur Sanders is just that. To me, if I'm an organization in need of a quarterback, I'm taking a shot at this guy. And if you want to talk about timing and going through your progressions, then that falls on coaching, right? This is the NFL. You'd figure you get the guy with that level of talent in-house, you'd be able to coach up some of those imperfections. The Cleveland Browns, situated at the top of round 2, look like they might have landed perfectly in this draft. They trade out of 2, right? They pass up on Travis Hunter, and they move down, get Mason Graham, and now they're in position to get Shedeur Sanders, who was rumored throughout a lot of this draft process to go number 2 to them overall in Cleveland. Let's talk a little bit about the Browns, because this team, to me, that they won the draft based on the circumstances that they were in as an organization. I think Travis Hunter is going to be an absolute star down in Jacksonville. And I love the aggressiveness the new GM in Jacksonville did, and putting his neck out there and saying, hey, we're going to go after the generational talent in Travis Hunter. But the Cleveland Browns, in trading out of that pick, they get another second, they get more picks, they get a future first, they get a guy in the middle of Mason Graham that is going to wreak havoc for them, and now they're in position to draft another quarterback. The Browns, in that trade for Deshaun Watson, it was the most brutal of situations that they put themselves into. It was a self-inflicted wound, and it crippled this franchise for years. This, to me, for the Cleveland Browns, is their saving grace, this trade that fell in their lap last night. And now to have the opportunity to get Shedeur Sanders in the house, how good would you feel to be a fan of the Cleveland Browns, to be in this Cleveland Brown organization with these circumstances playing out?
I think this is best case scenario for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, again, you bring Joe Flacco back, which is a really good move. Joe Flacco played really good football in this system with these same guys. You know, he's getting up there in age, and you can bring a young guy. He's a perfect guy to mentor a young quarterback coming into this game. He's a veteran who's won Super Bowls, who played a lot of really good football, who understands NFL defenses, understands how to prepare, understands how to approach the game. So I think Shedeur Sanders would benefit. I think it's just surprising that he was available at this time for them to even be able to pick him at the top of the second. But I agree. I think they got a haul. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, went with the Rams' theory and said, F these picks. There's a generational talent available that we don't think we'll get any other years. And obviously they value him in the way that they have. I think he's going to be a wide receiver for them initially with Brian Thomas. That makes them a really, really, really formidable receiving core. And Liam Cohen has some great guys to work with. But I think that this is a great move for the Browns. And they got a guy that they wanted, that they valued, that they had graded really high in Mason Graham, a guy that can really wreak havoc in the middle of that defense. Obviously, they still have Myles Garrett, who's a menace. This will only help him in his production. But I think they have to make a move. If they get Shedeur Sanders at the top of the second round, I mean, regardless of what else they do in this draft, I think this has been a home run.
No question. The one thing is there's not a whole lot of quarterbacks drafted in the second round. I mean, the last 3 years, there's only been one quarterback taken combined throughout all three, and that's Will Levis. I mean, you don't see a ton of guys in the history of football coming out of the second round. I mean, Brett Favre, obviously. You got Drew Brees, Jalen Hurts most recently. Geno Smith is probably the most comparable guy of recent with his slip and slide down the draft ranks out of West Virginia. We're seeing something similar out of Shedeur. Richard, you slid in the draft. I know you talked throughout your entire career about what that did to that big chip on your shoulder. I mean, how motivating is this going to be to Shedeur Sanders for the rest of his career, not being picked in the first round, being passed on by all 32 teams?
Well, I think it's going to be humbling and motivating at the same time. This is worst case scenario, at least for him and his family and his expectations. So I think it gave him a night to really, really sit there and self-reflect and understand what he's going to have to do and what this means. And I think it's going to make him a better player, a better person, a better leader, and a guy who really appreciates the opportunity that he's going to be given. I know it's frustrating. For me, I had to wait freaking 5 rounds to hear my name, and I heard it, and it was a huge chip on the shoulder and motivated me every single day, every single play, every single practice to go out there and push to be better and to be more and to, dominate, And I think he's already had that motivation. He comes from a good family. Obviously, Deion Sanders has mentored him his entire life, so he knows what the expectation is. But this is individual. This is unique to him. This is, hey, Deion was their first rounder, had all this stuff in front of him, and got treated a certain way. He's not going to get that treatment, so he's going to have to make waves his own way, and I think this is going to be good for him. This is a little bit of a pivot, a little bit of adversity that's unexpected, but I think he's a great person and a great player that's going to respond incredibly well to this, and I hope he goes to a situation that gives him an opportunity to thrive and gives him a situation where the offense is built in a way that can highlight and appreciate the talents that he has and his ability to push the ball down the field. Obviously, the teams picking early in the second round don't have the best offensive line, so it'll be similar to what he dealt with in college, but, hopefully he can navigate that situation. The NBA 82-game grind is done. Now the real fun begins. The NBA playoffs are here, and it's time for all the high-stakes drama, clutch moments, and jaw-dropping plays. I can't wait. If you're looking to make playoffs even more exciting, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered as an official sports betting partner of the NBA, from the play-in games all the way through the finals. Now's the time to back your favorite players and teams as they chase glory. All season long, DraftKings has been the go-to spot for NBA player props, and that doesn't stop now. Want to make the playoff experience even more intense? Try placing a bet on your favorite player's performance. Will they drop 30 points, 40, or more? It's your call. Ready to place your first bet? Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Lock in your bets, and let's make this playoff run unforgettable. Here's something special for first timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly.
Let's talk a little bit more about his former teammate, Travis Hunter here. We already talked a little bit about the Jags. I mean, James Gladstone, the new young GM, he loves him some Travis Hunter. He said there are very few players who have the capacity to alter the trajectory of the sport itself. Travis, while he has a lot to still learn in our eyes, has a potential to do just that. They gave up a lot to move up. Do you think he is worth that type of haul? I mean, giving up the 5th, a 2nd, a 4th, and a future 1st to move up and get a guy that is going to embark on the large task of playing both sides of the ball. What are your thoughts overall about Travis Hunter? Is he worth it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've gotten to the point where they've picked receivers. I mean, you remember what Atlanta gave up to get Julio Jones, and Julio Jones is one of the best receivers in the history of the Atlanta Falcons, in the history of the National Football League. And so if he makes that kind of impact, and obviously they had a first-round grade on him as a receiver, a first-round grade on him as a corner. So a guy that can come in and really impact the game on both sides of the ball. I'm not sure how they'll use him. I would have guessed they would, it's the offensive league, so they'll try him on offense first and try to find him the spot play on defense, which I'm not sure is a great plan because it's hard to spot play on defense. Like, you take a guy off the field and they can literally ruin the game, the plays off the field. You take 5 plays off on defense and they can give up 5 touchdowns, and you're looking up and you're like, hey, well, what was the point of playing him on defense if you're going to take him off the field and they can just bomb us the same way they were going to before, and he's not able to make the impact that you want him to make. But I think that he's worth it because of his star power that he brings, the talent that he obviously brings. If you can pay what you need to pay for generational talent, rather than pass up on it and potentially miss it, you do what you got to do. I mean, time will only tell if he's worth the haul, but I think he's going to be worth it, and he's going to be incredibly impactful, a Pro Bowl, All-Pro, perennial player in this league.
I know he wants to play both sides of the ball. He's expressed that throughout this entire draft process, and he's proven he's more than capable of doing so. But with that comes a lot of questions. Obviously, he's a well-conditioned athlete. But, Richard, you talked about it in Legion of Boom days. You talked about these receivers just trying to run go routes to get you guys gassed. Like, if he really is to play on both sides of the ball, how much of a tall task is that? Is it fully realistic? And if he's only going to play, to your point, 50% of the snaps defensively, like, could you imagine yourself coming in and out, 50% of the game? Like, I have to imagine you settle into a groove, you get comfortable. You might have a play or two that you don't feel comfortable with, but you finally find your footing and settle in. Like, how important is that to have that consistent repetition at that position throughout the game? Is it realistic that he can play and contribute effectively on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, that's to be seen. It hasn't been done a lot at corner. That's why you don't see really corners rotating successfully, splitting time and things like that, because it's a tough position. You see it at receiver because the receiver can come out for a couple plays, take a water break, get a squig, come back in there and still make impactful plays and get targeted and bust the game open. But at corner, it's really difficult to do because you do get into a rhythm of the game, a rhythm of footwork, tackling and just impacting the game from that side of the ball. So, but it's something he's done at the college level. He's shown that he's capable of doing, but it's going to be really difficult to do in the National Football League if they don't have a great plan for him. You got to keep him in there for a while on defense so that he can get the rhythm. I think offensively, you can take him in and out, not really lose anything. He not really lose his impact. But I think if you play like that on defense, you run the risk of putting him in a really difficult situation if he's not in rhythm.
Let's talk a little bit about your former teams. Let's start with the San Francisco 49ers. They had a lot of needs going in this draft, a lot of roster turnover this offseason. Obviously, paying Brock Purdy on the horizon. That comes with some tough roster decisions, and John Lynch handled those the best he thought he could. They had needs at offensive line. Obviously, Trent Williams is not getting any younger, but they also had need at edge opposite of your boy, Nicholas John Bosa. They choose Mykel Williams out of Georgia, number 11. He's coming off an ankle injury in 2024, but he was a human highlight reel at Georgia. How happy are you with this pick for the San Francisco 49ers?
I'm really happy. I think he's going to be a great player. I think he's a great pick. You can't really go wrong picking out of Georgia. There's been You look at the Philadelphia Eagles, just won the Super Bowl, and they're Georgia East, and they have been. A lot of great players. Nakobe Dean, Noah Smith was impactful from Georgia. Obviously, Jalen Carter, Davis, Keely Ringo. Those are just the guys off the top of my head that I can remember from Georgia in their national championship teams. But yeah, I think he's going to be a really good player. Nicholas John Bosa needed some help. They needed to revamp that defensive line and get another good pass rusher on the other side of Bosa, and they've been trying to do that for years. They tried it with Leonard Floyd. They tried it with Chase Young, who had some success, and they've been trying to find him a complementary piece for a number of years. So hopefully this guy's the answer. The coaches are really excited about him. The staff's really excited about him. They were trying to trade up to get him. Luckily, he fell to them at the spot they were in, so that's been really good.
And now they have picks 43, 75, and 100 day 2 of the draft. Obviously, as we said, they got a lot of positions in need. Which route would you most like to see them go?
Well, offensive line. Because I know that Kyle and John feel comfortable with the guys they have, but I don't think I do. I don't know if the fans do, but, they know more than me and they know better. But I just think depth is always an issue, and guys consistently get hurt, and you can never have enough good offensive linemen. And there are very few in the National Football League, and even fewer to go around to other teams. So with Trent Williams, obviously getting up there in age, getting a little banged up, you got to have more guys that can be able to play in case he gets banged up, or you get banged up somewhere else. You got to have guys that can come in there and play and contribute. And I just don't think they have enough right now. They lost Jalen Moore, who was their swing tackle, who did come in there and play when guys got hurt. So I think that's a place you got to address. Obviously, a lot of tackles went off the board late. The Chiefs got a tackle at the end of the first round. And I think that's something you got to really look forward to if you're the San Francisco 49ers. So obviously, corner is a position of need. Safety with Talanoa Hufanga going to Denver is a position that you're going to need to address. Mustafa's gonna obviously be the penciled-in starter, but I think you got to continue to find depth at those positions. Linebacker, you lose Greenlaw, is a position they've drafted really well at, and they have to continue to draft well at. So those are the spots that I would be looking at if I'm the San Francisco 49ers.
Let's go a little bit further north. Seattle Seahawks. They're talking about offensive line trench work. Richard, Grey Zabel out of North Dakota State. Rumor has it he was slugging a bunch of Busch Lights last night with his family. This is a guy, I know a lot of teams liked, and frankly, I was hoping he would slide all the way down to the Lions. Obviously, Seattle liked him. He's versatile. He played tackle at North Dakota State. He can play guard, and I think they're going to probably slot him in at guard in the NFL. But how important was this pick for the Seattle Seahawks as they try to bolster that offensive line?
It's really important. I mean, this is one of those picks, and you could hear John talking about it. The last interior offensive lineman that was drafted this high was Hutch, and he's an all-time in the Hall of Fame offensive lineman. One of the greatest to ever play, and so that's what you need. And obviously, that's really high expectations and big shoes to fill for Zabel. But I think they expect this guy to be a really impactful player for a very long time and early on. And I don't know if he's going to be playing guard or center or tackle. I think they're going to keep him inside, so either center or guard. But this is where they had to go. They had a rough time on the interior offensive line last year. They got a lot of pressure up the middle, down the middle throughout the year. So being able to solidify that with a quarterback who's less mobile than Geno Smith was, not that Sam Darnold can't move around and can't run when he has to, but he's not known to be a mobile quarterback. He's more of a pocket passer, stand in there, set his feet and deliver the football. And I think the better you can protect him, the more effective he's going to be. And the more effective any quarterback's going to be if you keep him clean. So it was really important for them to create a strong pocket for Sam Darnold, and I think that's what they did. That's what they're focused on, and I'm very impressed with John in this pick. I think this is a great pick. I think this is a great player, and I think this player is going to be really good with this franchise for a long time. It's not always the flashy picks that push organizations forward. Sometimes it's the consistent, hardworking, the do-right guys, and you get enough of them in your organization, you become a really complete team like your Detroit Lions. That's why they are a factor now. They've drafted really well. on the offensive and defensive line over the last couple of years, and it's made them contenders year in and year out. And I think that's what Seattle's going to do now. They obviously have drafted defensive linemen consistently, and now they draft the offensive lineman. That's going to help them for a long time. So I love the pick.
Well, you talked about being a hard worker and being dedicated. He's a farmer in his free time, Rich. So, you're going to have to find some land for him to farm up there in Seattle. And moreover, obviously he played at NDSU. This era of the transfer portal, he probably could have gone anywhere. And I know there was a lot of Power 5 schools that were interested in him, but he was loyal to NDSU and stuck it out for the rest of his career. I have to believe that the Seattle Seahawks organization viewed that as a huge positive, because we see it time and time again with these guys bouncing from team to team to team. And I can imagine that's a turnoff for GMs. And I know you probably think the same way. How big do you think it is for an organization to look at a player's loyalty to their college university that they're sticking with for 5 years?
I think it's important, but I think that each situation is unique. You look at Travis Hunter, he left Jackson State to go to Colorado, but he left because Prime left. He left because his coaching staff. So it's unique opportunities like that. Sometimes you run into a situation where literally the entire coaching staff leaves, like the University of Washington, the staff left to go to University of Alabama. That's going to affect kids. But I think there is a microscope on kids that are leaving more than 2-3 times from a university. It's a bad look. Obviously, it's in the news right now about the quarterback from Tennessee, wanting to leave because he wasn't getting $4 million and going to UCLA and getting less. Things like that will be red flags for teams, because it's just unnecessary headaches. And there's a huge talent pool in college football. And unless you're at the tippity top of that talent pool, you're not going to be given the grace. And now if you're a monster and you're a guy that, talent gives you more grace, Mitchell. The more talent, the more grace, the more leash. But I think they are looking at that more. Kids that are like, hey, I'm not the starter this year, so I transfer. Oh, I wasn't the starter there, so I transfer. I think that's going to start to be a red flag that teams look at, and teams don't want to pursue kids like that, or at least don't want to draft them early on in the draft. They're going to wait a few rounds and let it be somebody else's problem. Let it be somebody else, because those are the kids that will be holding out, disputing contracts, not coming to practice because of certain things. And I think, that's definitely going to be something teams have to be wary of.
Now, the Seahawks, after trading DK Metcalf, sit with a plethora of day 2 picks. They're picking 50, 52, 82, and 92 on day 2. Obviously, they have a whole lot wide receiver. Tyler Lockett walks out the door. DK Metcalf is traded. Where do you want to see the Seattle Seahawks go on day 2?
Well, I think they're going to have to continue to look at offensive line, obviously. I think they're good just about everywhere else. I think they feel good with K9 and Charbonnet at the running back spot. I do think another receiver in the second round, between 50, 52, and 98, I think you're going to be able to find a wide receiver that's capable of being a really good player in the National Football League. I think linebacker is somewhere where you can always look for depth. I think they're really good at D-line right now, but, I'm sure Mike McDonald is of the understanding that more is more, and if you can never have enough defensive linemen and pass rushers. So I'm sure if there's a guy there that they can't miss on, they're going to take him. But I think right now they're going to just pick best available. I think they continue to go offensive line, but I think if there's a guy there that is a pass rusher or a corner or somebody that they just feel like they cannot miss on, a guy they cannot pass on, if Will Johnson's there, I think you take him, because I think he's a guy that had a first-round grade. I think they're saying he has some chronic issues with his knee is why he fell out of the first round. But I think in the second round, if you're looking at a guy like that who was considered a top 10 talent for a majority of his career, you got to take a flyer on that. If he's there at 50, I think he's the guy you pick.
I'm right there with you. I love the best player available approach, especially for the Seahawks with this amount of picks. I think so many draft analysts and, Twitter analysts, whatever you want to call them, they get so caught up in the positional value of who's being drafted. They look at a team's need and said, you need a defensive end and you drafted a safety. And they don't sit back and analyze the player. You don't want to sit there and reach. These are these organizations that stay in this perpetual hamster wheel of mediocrity are the ones that are reaching on positions of need. as opposed to taking the best player available. And that's something we see with the Philadelphia Eagles every single year. They're taking the best player available. They get Jahad Campbell again this year, who was widely considered a top 15 pick. I know he's got some injury issues, but good organizations draft the best player available. So, while these analysts are going to get caught up in analyzing the position that was drafted, sit back and analyze the player. The Seahawks have got an absolute war chest of capital in day 2. We'll see what they do with it. Let's transition to Pete Carroll, your former coach, down now in Vegas. They take a stab. I know he likes to hammer the rock. I'm sure he would love to have prime Marshawn Lynch in his backfield, and he got the best thing he could next to that, and that's Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. A lot of folks question taking a running back that high at number 6 overall, but obviously Pete Carroll and the Raiders have a plan for him. What are your thoughts on Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders at 6?
I think that's a perfect fit and a perfect scheme and a perfect place for Ashton Jeanty. I think it's a great pick for Pete Carroll and the Las Vegas Raiders because of the way he likes to coach and likes to game plan a football game. Like, he loves to run the football, play action pass. He loves to control the clock, to keep the defense off the field as long as possible. And I think that's what he's going to do. That's been his recipe for success. That was our recipe for success when we went to the Super Bowl, when we won the Super Bowl, when we went the next year is, hey, we're not going to throw it a ton, but when we throw it, we're going to take care of the ball. We're not going to turn it over a ton. We're not going to have a lot of risky plays. We're going to run the ball well. We're going to control the clock. We're going to 3 yards in a cloud of dust our way through, pop some big ones, and then we're going to play great defense. We're going to play sound defense, gap control, gap sound, not letting footballs fly over our head. We're going to make them walk the ball down the field, be stingy in the red zone, and they're going to win football games. And I think he has the running back that's a home run hitter that, hey, when there's a hole there, there's a gap, there's a tackle to be broken, he's going to be able to get those extra yards. He's going to be able to be durable enough to be an every down back for him. He's shown that in college. He's shown that he can be the guy that your team leans on. And then he has a veteran quarterback in Geno Smith that he just got, that he knows well, that he knows can get the job done that he needs done to win football games. And I think that's going to be really important and really fun to watch. I think it's going to be a great situation for Geno. I think it's going to be a great move for all parties involved, and Raiders fans should be excited.
I'm with you. The Las Vegas Raiders, Geno Smith should be thrilled. I mean, they got weapons there in Las Vegas for Geno. I mean, this Ashton Jeanty draft pick makes a ton of sense. And you got Brock Bowers, one of the rising stars, arguably the best tight end in football his rookie year, right? I mean, and he's only going to get better going into year 2. Vegas might be a team to look out for going into this season. Richard, I want to talk a little bit about my Detroit Lions. They were picking towards the bottom of the draft, which it takes some getting used to as a Detroit Lions fan, but I loved it, man. I was able to watch the entire draft, and we saw how it fell to us. The Lions team, their organization, they stood pat this free agency period. They didn't make a ton of splashy moves. They obviously got DJ Reed. But like we talked about, they're building from the ball out, and they got Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. And I know a lot of folks want the edge rusher. They wanted Mike Green out of Marshall or the kid out of Boston College. But Tyleik Williams, Brad Holmes seems to get it. You err on the side of drafting from a high-end college football program, and you did just that with Ohio State. Tyleik Williams earned honorable mention his freshman and sophomore year and was third team All-Big Ten both of his junior and senior year. What are your thoughts about this pick for the Detroit Lions at defensive tackle Tyleik Williams?
I think, as always, man, they make really solid picks, guys that are going to play in the National Football League for a long time, be really impactful. I thought it was a great pick. A guy that's going to help them. Again, not a flashy, splashy pick, but a pick that fans will appreciate when you look in December and January and they're stuffing the run and the guys aren't able to run the ball in this defense. They're going to appreciate this pick. But I think Brad Holmes has done a great job building this team. This was the best talent he felt like was available in terms of the health. They're trying to get away from drafting guys with health issues or medical problems or medical red flags. And that has been apparent with the way he's drafted. But I think this is a great pick, a guy that's going to contribute for a long time, a guy that's going to be really rock solid in the middle of that defense. And I think the fans will eventually be very excited.
Let's talk a little bit about the cornerbacks in this year's draft. We didn't see a whole lot of them getting taken in round one. It was really only two. Jahdae Barron out of Texas, who's that Swiss Army knife. Jim Thorpe Award winner, goes to the Broncos, which is going to just build that secondary and that defense of that Denver Bronco team even more. And Maxwell Harrison goes to the Bills. Let's start with Jahdae Barron. How much do you like what the Denver Broncos are doing here? It seems like, everyone thought their secondary was set. You got Pat Surtain. You got all these other guys in one of the best defenses in football, but they're making their position of strength stronger. What are your thoughts on Jahdae Barron to the Denver Broncos?
I mean, the rich get richer, and they're focusing on defense. They feel like that's the way they're going to win football games. Having a strong defense and being able to stop guys. They play a lot of man-to-man coverage, so the more the merrier, the more guys you got out there to cover. Riley Moss had a really great season. Obviously, had that rough game against the Cincinnati Bengals and T. Higgins. But for overall, I think people understand Patrick Surtain, the defensive player of the year, reigning defensive player of the year, is going to be out there. He's going to probably be on the team's best wide receiver, and everybody else is going to be really impactful. I don't know if they expect Jahdae Barron to be on the outside or the inside, but he played a number of positions, and he can play inside, he can play outside, he can be at the safety spot. So I'm interested to see how they use him, but it's going to be a really fun defense to watch this year. They were fun to watch last year, but they're only getting better.
And then the Bills, they address a position of need. Maxwell Harrison, really rose up the draft boards, running a 4.28 at the combine out of Kentucky. They project him as a slot corner. Obviously, the Bills need some help in the secondary. What do you think of this pick for them?
I think it's great. I mean, they got banged up late in the season. They get banged up at the corner spot just about every year where they lose guys and lose starters. So this is a guy I think they know can play, and he can play man-to-man. He can play zone. He can play everything. He's got a great set of hands. I think he's going to be a really good football player, but we'll see. Buffalo's a tough place to play DB with the weather and inclement weather, and they've drafted corners early on before that haven't necessarily panned out the way they wanted them to, but I think this is one that's going to pan out well.
As you look at this position, I mean, who was your favorite DB in this draft class? Was it Jahdae Barron? I know we already talked about Will Johnson. Let's leave Travis Hunter out of this conversation for the time being because I think he takes the cake on that. Who's your favorite DB in this class?
Well, Will Johnson was my favorite DB. I thought he played the game the right way. He plays with an understanding, great feet, great instincts, great hands, but unfortunately he didn't run well and he has the injury concerns. But he's my favorite corner in the draft, and he's still available. And I think he's going to have a great NFL career. I could be wrong. I haven't seen the medical report on him, but he's the guy that I had high hopes for.
Let's talk winners and losers here. As round one concluded, and I know it's hard to say, we're all armchair, analysts here, but who's your best team? I said round one, all things considered. Who do you think took the cake as the winner of the draft?
I hate doing that. I don't know, Mitchell. I can't say on that because, you got bad teams picking really good players and you got great teams picking players late in the draft. They're still great teams. The Kansas City Chiefs, they get worse. No, they didn't. They've been in the Super Bowl the last few years, 4 of the last 5 years. And they'll likely be there again. The Philadelphia Eagles got great, but the Jacksonville Jaguars got Travis Hunter. Did they get better? Sure. They picked up a great player, high caliber player, but they have other things to work out. There's a reason their coach got fired. There's a reason they're picking this high in the draft because they have some things to fix. But draft picks, I hate when they do winners and losers of draft day or winners and losers of the offseason because you really won't know until you line up on Sundays. There's been Super Bowl champions named in the offseason that have picked top 5 the next year. Hey, they won the offseason, but why are they picking top 5 again? Because they didn't win anything. Offseason isn't a record kept. It's not a time. Who lines up on Sundays for 17 weeks and plays well? And I think we won't know that. We won't even know how some of these rookies will play until they line it up in training camp. So I got no comment on who won or who lost. I like a lot of these picks. I like the Seahawks pick. I like the Niners pick. I love Travis Hunter going to Jacksonville. We'll see what the quarterbacks, Jackson Dart and Cam Ward. We'll see how Cam Ward does in Tennessee. I like Mason Graham in Cleveland. I like Abdul Carter and with the Giants, with Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau. I think that's going to be a really formidable front that's going to wreak havoc for a lot of teams.
I tend to agree with you. This winner and loser segment here. Rewind back to 2023. My Detroit Lions were considered the losers of the draft when they took Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, and Brian Branch, and we see how that critique panned out. Richard, again, my favorite time of year. Round 1 is a wrap. I know you're going to be presenting round 2 pick for the Seattle Seahawks tonight. I know you're excited about it. I will let you sign us off, my friend.
Well, appreciate you, Mitchell. This is a great time of the year. I hope you guys are enjoying this and enjoying the guys your team picked. I think this is going to be a great day. I look forward to announcing the Seahawks pick. I think it's going to be fun. Hopefully it's a great guy and a great player. But I appreciate you guys for joining us. As always, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We sure do appreciate it. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Enjoy the draft.